And you may have
Hey
things you
guys,
would like
we
to
are already live.
add as
The
well.
Senate
And
committee
if so, I
hearing
can
has
swear
just
you in at this
started.
time as well. Okay? And we'll do that. If you'll raise your right hand.
They are about to do her swearing in, and while we're going over that, we are going to be hearing testimony from Amanda Timpson. She is the whistleblower that said, "Hey, Fani Willis, I want to let you know that these funds that are supposed to go towards the Youth Prevention, Gang Prevention Center, we're doing some interesting things with them. People want to buy swag and things that maybe they shouldn't be doing with these funds." And the Senate Georgia Special Committee on Investigations wants to hear more about what Amanda Timpson has to say.
Who you're working for at the present time.
Sure. My name is Amanda Timpson. I am a resident of Fulton County, and currently I work for the Momentum Advisory Collective, a national nonprofit working with justice-involved youth.
Did you previously work for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office?
I did.
And what years did you work with the DA's office?
I worked with the DA's office from 2018 to 2022.
Okay. Would you give us just a little bit of background on your educational history, your educational background?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology from Georgia State. I have a master's degree in human behavior from Capella University, a postmaster's specialist in community intervention, and several other certifications in ongoing education.
Okay. What was your employment history just generally before you became employed by the Fulton County District Attorney's Office?
So I've worked in juvenile diversion and with gang prevention for about 15 years, and it started in Los Angeles, in Compton, and I worked and volunteered in spaces and nonprofits from youth diversion to gang prevention to mental health services. When I relocated here to Atlanta, I taught at both APS and DeKalb County School District for about 4 years combined. And then in 2018, I came on at the District Attorney's Office under Paul Howard as the Director of Gang Prevention and Intervention.
When did you move back to the Atlanta area or relocate here to the Atlanta area?
I've been here for about 9 years.
And
about 10 years, excuse
when
me.
you worked for DeKalb County Schools and Atlanta Public Schools, what was your role there? Were you a teacher or a counselor, or give us a little idea?
I was a middle school social studies teacher.
Okay. And so what led you to apply for employment with the District Attorney's Office?
Prior to relocating here in Atlanta, my background was gang prevention, and so when I came here, I didn't really see too much of that. It's a passion. It's something that I got into due to experiences in my own life, and I just felt like I understood gang issues from a unique standpoint, and I wanted to be a part of the solution.
Okay. It was. Tell us a little bit about your position there. I don't know that I could repeat what you just said with the, did you say you're the Director of Gang Prevention and Intervention? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that was under District Attorney Paul Howard?
Correct.
Was that a position that was funded by a grant or something he created, or it would have been an opening? Tell us how that became a possibility.
Yes, sir. Sorry. So he created the Office of the Gang Coordinator, and under that office was the Unit for Gang Prevention and Intervention. He saw an uptick in criminal street gang activity, specifically in youth, and wanted to work to divert some general funds and apply for grant funds to eradicate gang activity in Atlanta.
Were you the first Director of Gang Prevention and Intervention?
I was.
Okay, so that was a newly created position that you applied for?
Yes.
Okay. And Paul Howard was the DA here for what, 18 or 20 years, I guess, before Ms. Willis?
Correct.
Is that who you reported to, or did you have another supervisor?
He was my direct supervisor.
Tell me what you did in that role.
In that role, I created diversionary programs. I worked with Atlanta Public Schools to educate their school resource officers on gang trends that we were seeing in our office. I also was tasked with creating a steering committee of Fulton County residents and leaders to try to kind of steer the direction of the gang prevention. I was also tasked with creating opportunities for gang prevention, and one of those opportunities was we were gifted a building at 475 Fairburn Road, and we were going to rehab that building and turn it into the Gang Prevention Center for youth empowerment. And so I managed all functions of that center, including creating programming and working with partners in the community, as well as the rehabilitation, so working with engineers, contractors, et cetera.
Okay, it doesn't
So
look
you
like they have
helped,
closed captioning. Oh, they do.
develop
Okay,
that
closed
center and get
captions.
it, retrofitted or refurbished or whatever for those purposes.
Yes, sir.
So that was a gift? Some citizen donated that for that purpose, or?
It was actually donated by the county. I'm not sure exactly that process. It happened prior to me coming on board, I believe, in
Let me change where my face
2017.
is.
The county gifted it to the DA's office, and the DA's office sought to create a gang prevention center.
So that may have been one of the motivating factors for creating your position once you had a facility there for youth gang prevention and intervention or whatnot at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay. So tell me about the funding. You mentioned that there were some general funds from Fulton County, and then there were federal grants that helped fund your position in this program?
So my position was funded fully by the DA's office. And there were general funds allocated to rehab the building. The grant funds were allocated specifically to fund programming out of this building. So when we applied for the grant, we applied for it with the thought in mind that we already had this building and that we already had funds to rehab this building. So we got it contingent upon the building being there.
And give me an idea of the amount of the grants or where they come from? Federal government, some department, what's the?
Yes, there was one specific grant that was specific to the building, and that was the 2020 OJJDP Gang Prevention Grant. And so that
So
was
that's a federal grant.
given to us in October of 2020, and the amount was $488,564, I believe.
All right, so tell me what that stands for, OJJDP?
The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention.
So was that something that you had a part in applying for that grant?
Yes, I helped co-write the grant. Myself, my colleague, and our grant writer all contributed to co-writing that grant in early 2020, I believe.
So you submit that to the Office of Juvenile Justice at the federal level.
Yes, sir.
I guess other DA offices around the country also can apply for these type of grants?
Yes, they're very competitive.
And you won. You got
Yes.
it was granted to you?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that amount was $488,564.
Yes.
What were the funds to be used for? Do you have to specify that when you apply for a grant, how much money you need and what you're going to spend it on?
Yes. And I think one of the reasons that we were awarded the grant was because our grant was so specific. So the grant consisted of us narrating basically the gang issue in Fulton County. So we broke it down by zip codes, by active gangs in those specific zip codes, by correlating schools that those gangs fed into, and then the age range was 12 to 17. So ultimately, the grant funds were supposed to be allocated for the programming that fit that age range, that population, And so the programming would consist of sub-awardees, which are other organizations that are doing the work in the community. We don't necessarily do all of the work. A lot of times we manage the work. And so, but all of that was supposed to be done out of the gang center, if that makes sense.
That does. So you, as the coordinator, would have other private organizations that are charitable organizations wanting to intervene with troubled youth to prevent gang violence?
Yes, and in this situation, it was all nonprofits and excluding Fulton County Schools and Atlanta Public Schools.
Were they engaged or involved as well?
Yes.
But you didn't have to pay them for their
We did.
services? Right.
We did.
Some of these nonprofits you would provide funding to funneled through this grant?
Correct.
Thanks, E. Capone. I appreciate you.
What are the rules around federal grants? You sound pretty savvy about that. Are there specific reporting requirements or spending limitations? What happens once you obtain the grant?
So once you obtain the grant, you have to provide a clear budget. And once you do that, they'll release the funds. Once you release the funds, you have to basically show your work. So that is manifested in a quarterly report. So you manage your sub-recipients, and then every 4 months, you send in a quarterly report that basically illustrates what you've done with the money and ensures that there is, that you're following the grant.
Right. And so that initial budget, do you have to lay it out to the federal agency how you intend to spend the money?
Correct.
They get to approve or reject that, or is that part of the application process?
A little bit of both. In the application, you outline what your intentions are, but you have a certain amount of time to go back and say, once you've gotten the award, say something doesn't work out, say a nonprofit closes their doors and they no longer can be your partner, then obviously you can find somebody else that does comparable work, and then they could fill that spot. But there's not a lot of leeway because they obviously give you the money for specific things. So unless you can ensure that you are still doing those specific things, then that's the only way that you can get an exception.
Was any portion of this grant intended for salaries or compensation for employees of the district attorney's office?
There was. Part of the grant was to, I believe, the community resource officer. On the grant, I believe 50% of their salary was paid by this grant. And so that was the only portion. Their salary and their fringe benefits were paid by this grant.
Was any of your salary paid for by this grant?
No, because I was a district attorney's full-time employee.
All right. When was that application submitted? You don't have to give me the precise date, but just the general time frame.
You know, COVID messed up my dates, but I believe it was either the very end of 2019 or that first part of 2020.
And when was it granted, or when did you learn you had obtained that grant?
The last week in October of 2020.
Okay. And so Fani Willis would have been elected in the first week of November of 2020.
Yes, she was elected a week after.
When was the budget submitted that you mentioned, or the spending plan that allowed the release of the funding?
I believe that was in late January, obviously with the change in administration and it was still COVID. They understood and gave us some time, and I believe it was in late January.
All right. The full amount was awarded, the 488?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as you are doing your role, are there other grants that you applied for as well?
There was no other grants that I specifically applied for. There was other grants that I helped manage, and if you want me to go into that, I can.
Yeah, we learned an awful lot at our last meeting about the Fulton County DA's office budget, that they get some state funds, they get their allocation or I don't know what you call it, their funding from the county itself, and then they get all these federal programs or federal grants as well. I'm trying to flesh out the federal part now because the county knows. I think they gave them $36 million last year, and they mentioned a big $75 million amount of basically COVID funds. That it wasn't all spent to the DA's office, but for the justice system. But I don't know that anybody really knows what the total budget is at the DA's office or how much of that is funded through federal grants. And so I'm trying to get you to educate me a little bit. You knew specifically about this OJJDP grant.
Yes,
because
sir.
you helped write it.
Yes.
But there are other ones that you would have helped manage or administer.
Yes. So the other one specifically that I helped manage was the JAG grant. So it's a Justice Assistance Grant. It's also a federal grant, but it's allocated to the state and then ultimately delegated to the counties, and then the county commissioners allot it how they see fit. For the DA's office, it was to fund the junior DA program.
All right, let me slow you down 1 minute.
Yes, sir.
I'm absorbing this information a little bit slower. You know it like the back of your hand.
Right.
That is a social justice assistance grant,
Yes, it's a justice assistance.
and that's why you call it a JAG for the Justice Assistance Grant.
Yes, sir.
And that is distributed among various DA's offices in the state.
Yes.
Do you have to apply to the state to get that, or is that coming directly from the feds?
It's coming directly from the feds.
All right. Do you know if other DA's offices around the state of Georgia receive grant funds from that JAG grant?
I believe so. I just know it's the Edward Brine Justice Assistance Grant. And to my knowledge, I believe that some, if not all, can get it. But I think it's based on need.
And do you know the amount of that grant, the JAG grant for this? Apparently you used it for the junior DA program.
Yes, correct. I don't know the explicit amount, and we have been trying to get that information for quite some time. I just know that it funded the junior DA program, which I believe yearly spent about $20,000. So it was a small grant for the DA's office.
Tell me about the junior DA program.
Yes, sir. It's a crime prevention program specific to youth, middle school and ninth grade, so 6th, 7th, 8th, and ninth grade. And it's essentially to bridge the gap between community and law enforcement, and basically show youth, what the functions of the of different forms of law enforcement, everything from, we go to the Atlanta Police Training Center, the Horse Mount Center, we go to the state capitol, we go to speak with judges and, just different officers. I think sometimes they even get to work with the SWAT officers. And overall, it's just to, again, create camaraderie between youth and law enforcement and just show them overall functions of that process.
How many kids involved in that program every year?
Well, under Mr. Howard, it was in excess of 80 to 120. The 1 year that I did it under Ms. Willis, there was only 40 youth. So, and that was also during 2021. So I know COVID probably had partial fault in that as well.
Is that a year-long program?
So it's a summer program, and it's run for 3 weeks throughout the summer, and they come with us every day. I believe that year they were with us every day but Friday.
So it's almost like a summer camp type program, but you don't spend the night.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you educate these middle school children as to the justice system, both from how the DA's office operates, law enforcement operates, and various aspects of the community.
Absolutely. And it's really geared towards at-risk or low-income populations as well, because a lot of times they can't also, summer programs cost a lot of money, so this is a free option as well.
So it's free for the kids that participate in it?
Yes, sir.
And that's what the grant is, to fund the operating cost of that free program?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any parameters around how you spend that money or who's allowed to participate in the program?
Well, the program is specific for Fulton County youth, and you must be attending Fulton County schools or Atlanta Public Schools. And then again, you have to be in 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th grade.
And that program was already in existence during Paul Howard's tenure as district attorney?
Yes, I believe in 2019 he celebrated his 20th year doing it, so he did it for quite a long time.
That's a long-standing Atlanta Fulton DA office program.
Yes, sir.
Was in place long before Fani Willis was elected.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
So she inherited it, so to speak.
Yes.
And did she take over the program after that, or did she designate a specific individual in the DA's office to monitor or manage that?
Yes. Michael Cuffey, he was, at the time, he was the chief programs officer.
Okay.
And he oversaw all programs, so he was my direct supervisor at the time, and he was the direct supervisor over myself and the junior DA program as well.
Was Mr. Cuffey with the DA's office during Paul Howard's tenure?
No.
Okay, so he was a new employee, came
Yes,
in
sir.
with Miss Willis.
Yes.
Okay. Who did you report to as the Director of Gang Prevention and Intervention?
I reported directly to Mr. Howard.
Okay. Did your role change after he was defeated by Miss Willis?
Yes. So the week after she was elected, she sent an email to the DA's office, all current employees of the DA's office, along with her new organizational chart, and basically told us that a lot of changes were coming, and one of those changes would be employees. And so while we were all guaranteed an opportunity to apply and interview, she would guarantee us an interview. We weren't guaranteed a job. And so upon reviewing the organizational chart, I realized the gang prevention unit had been abolished. So my job was not there for me, even if I wanted it. And so I found 3 other positions and applied for those positions. And on November 20th of 2020, I interviewed in front of a 9-member panel led by Miss Willis and Nathan Wade and Jeff DeSantis and 6 other individuals. And ultimately, on December 9th of 2021, I received my invitation to the administration along with the congratulations letter.
On January 9th of 21?
December 9th, I'm sorry.
December 9th.
Of 2020.
2020, okay.
Yes.
So she didn't officially take office until, I would assume, January, right?
Yes.
Okay. But she went ahead and was having the transition, hiring new people. All right.
Yes.
So Mr. Wade was on this committee that interviewed you?
Yes.
Was he employed by the DA's office at that time, to your knowledge?
I don't know because I didn't know him. I just knew that he was, I would see him around the office, but also I just knew that he was one of the main ones leading the interview, and so I just took notice between Miss Willis, Jeff DeSantis, and Nathan Wade because they were the main ones leading the interview.
And who is Jeff DeSantis?
I believe he is her media personnel, but I know he's an attorney, but I don't know his exact title in her office.
Had he previously been employed by the district attorney's office?
No, he had not.
So he was a new player in the game.
Yes,
Okay. So your interview must have gone well,
it did.
and you were awarded the job.
I was.
What was the new job? You said there were 2 or 3 different positions you looked at in the new administration.
Yes. So my new position was the Director of Juvenile Diversion.
So still working with troubled youth.
Yes.
Was that just a renamed department as the reorganization, new organizational chart went, or was it very similar in duties or something totally different?
It was a little bit of both. Similar because I worked with the same population. Different in that it wasn't specific to gang related or gang involvement, and also different because the focus of gang reduction kind of shifted, and it was a lot more just open, I would say, like as far as just any youth who were justice involved. So I would work a lot with juvenile court.
Okay, so not just specific to juvenile gangs, any juvenile problems or issues?
Correct.
Okay. Now, same salary in the new position, or
Yes.
okay. Was there any unit that dealt specifically with youth gangs under this reorganization, or it kind of came under your umbrella as the director of juvenile diversion programs?
Yes, there was, so it came under my purview, so there was no more gang-specific unit other than the prosecution unit, the gang unit of attorneys I am programmed, so there was no programs for.
We are kind of learning as we go how massive the DA's office is. Do you know how many employees totally in the Fulton DA's office?
I don't.
Do you know
Hundreds.
do you know how many attorneys, assistant district attorneys?
If I even spoke on it, I wouldn't be accurate because I haven't been there in 2 years. However, I know there's hundreds,
All right.
at least
And it sounds
150, I would
like
think.
hundreds of support staff or other administrative personnel such as yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is in this new positions when you began reporting to Michael Cuffey?
Yes.
All right. Did you continue to supervise the OJJDP grant
Yes.
in your new position?
Yes. I was actually written into the grant as the grant project director. So no matter what I did, if that grant was valid, I would be supervising the grant.
All right. But you weren't paid through the grant?
No.
All right. And did you continue running the junior DA program?
Yes, for a short time.
All right. All right. Well, as 2021 begins, you're in your new role that has the same duties and more, and you're now reporting to Michael Cuffey instead of Paul Howard.
Correct.
Did you notice any irregularities or problems with the administration of this OJJDP grant?
Yes. In early March of 2021, after a lot of the administrative work was done on the grant, we need to now get to work. And so Michael Cuffey, who is the new chief programs officer, invited myself and my colleague, who also co-wrote the grant, into a meeting just so he could understand the scope of the grant. In this meeting, this was the first time that he kind of mentioned what he wanted to spend the grant on, and he articulated that he wanted to spend the grant on computers, travel, and swag. And at the time, we
Yeah,
were
the
saying
buffering is their
swag because there was a lot of rebranding going on. And so, like, each unit now had their own sweaters and their own mugs and stuff. And there was a complete and total rehaul of the building and stuff. So this idea of having swag was like a big thing. So those are the
These
three
trinkets.
things.
These are pins and
Yeah.
coffee cups and T-shirts and
Exactly.
sweatshirts, things
Exactly.
promoting the new district attorney?
Correct. And so I quickly kind of interjected and let him know that those were not things that we could do with the grant. At that point, it seemed as if he hadn't read the grant narrative. And so I just wanted to educate him. I was a bit concerned, but at that point, it was the first time I had heard of it. I just tried to kind of set him straight and tell him, like, oh, we can't do that. It's really specific, and it's specific to programming. We can't buy any equipment. And that was a huge thing because in the grant narrative, in the grant budget, it says specifically no equipment. And so his idea for wanting to get computers and even pay for travel, like, those are completely out of the scope of the grant.
Okay. And you know that because you wrote the grant?
Correct.
And in the grant plan, you tell how the money is going to be spent?
Correct.
And in the budget, you identify how it's intended to be spent?
Correct.
Did any of those documents provide for spending money on swag?
No.
Did any of those documents provide for spending money on computers or other
I don't know why it's
equipment?
buffering like that. It's
No,
not
sir.
giving me a
Did
symbol
any
that
of
is
those
reloading.
documents or budgets provide for money to be spent for travel?
No.
Okay. And how about on the junior DA grant? I think we called that the JAG grant. Were you continuing to administer that in March of 2021?
Yes.
And did you notice or detect or hear about any intentions to improperly spend that money?
Not in March, but as time went on, yes.
So what happened when you straightened Michael Cuffey out and after he had told you his intentions of how he intended to spend the money, you told him that was illegal? What was his reaction?
Initially, he let me know that it was the employees in the DA's office call Miss Willis Madam. So he let me know that it was Madam's vision. And I basically said, okay, I understand that, but that's not what the grant says. And as the director of the grant, I wanted to make sure that I was careful and clear what the grant said. And this grant was written prior to her coming in the office. I assumed at the time that maybe they just weren't aware, but I just wanted to make him aware that that is not what the grant says.
Okay. Did you hear further conversations about the misuse of the money, or did he follow your advice and not spend it on swag and travel and equipment?
So initially, that was just the initial time. I continued to be persistent and to let him and everybody else know that we could not spend the grant in that manner. And he persisted to say that that was what we were going to do with the grant. In weekly meetings, we had weekly program team meetings. He would say that, so it was multiple people that heard his intentions to spend this money that way. And I was just persistent in letting him know that that was not what we could do. And I noticed as I persisted to let him know that my treatment drastically started to change.
By him?
Yes, specifically from Michael Cuffey, in the form of being disinvited to meetings or being blatantly rude, or when I said, hey, we can't do that, just staring directly into my eyes and then just walking off. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't know, if this was an intimidation factor or what was going on, but I just knew I had to stand my ground because I was, fearful of the misuse of funds.
Okay. Well, so the story ends there, or did you continue your complaints?
No, I continued my complaints. Ultimately, in May of 2021, the overwhelming retaliation and pushback got so bad. I sent an email to Miss Willis and I told her that I had followed the chain of command to no avail and I really needed to speak with her. At this time, I believed that she had no idea what was going on, and I wanted to make her aware of what I saw to be a potentially illegal and dangerous situation, and I didn't want there to be any scandal related to her administration.
You sent that directly to her?
I did.
Did she reply?
She did not.
Okay.
But I believe 2 or 3 days later, Mr. Cuffey approached me and said that he knew that I reached out to her and that no matter what I did, that she was just going to come back to him. And so at that point, I didn't really know who to go to or what to do, because when I attempted to make her aware of what I saw to be a illegal situation, it was told directly to the person that was doing what I saw to be illegal.
Mr. Cuffey?
Mr. Cuffey,
Okay.
correct.
Did you complain to anybody else other than Mr. Cuffey in your email to Fani Willis?
Not in my initial email. Things started to progress as far as my retaliation. It was almost daily that it was something. If it wasn't something, it was, something else. Eventually, the junior DA program started to near, and he started saying that he was going to be buying Apple products with the junior DA funds.
Apple products like Apple iPhones or computers?
Computers.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but he just really wanted these Apple computers. So I let him know that we couldn't do that with the junior DA funds either. And so he took me off the directing the junior DA program and put other people in my place. And then eventually, when junior DA started in June of 2021, noticed that there were youth in the program that were not Fulton County residents, weren't even residents of the state of Georgia. There were youth in the program from Florida, from Wisconsin. And so, of course, I questioned it. I felt like, our youth in Fulton County have so much need. Why are we not focusing on the youth in our county, especially when the grant and the grant application or the application to the program specifically say that must be Fulton County residents, must attend Fulton County or Atlanta Public Schools. So when I brought that to him,
We're still talking about Mr. Cuffey.
Mr. Cuffey, excuse me, sorry. So when I brought that to Mr. Cuffey, the next day I was told that we needed to have a meeting, and he attempted to put me on some type of a plan, like a professional development plan. I've never been written up, never had any warnings, so
I was wondering if you have a history of being a troublemaker in the
I do
workplace.
not. I do not. And in the evidence that I gave you, I also included 24 letters of recommendation from everybody that I've worked for in the past 12 years, including everybody here in Atlanta that I've ever worked for, saying the exact opposite of what's been stated of me. However, he tried to put me on some plan, but the plan was like a personal attack on me. It talked about my appearance, and it was just not a professional. So I escalated my concerns to HR.
There we go. We got the HR.
Human resources.
Human resources, excuse me. So the HR personnel in the DA's office, her name is Kyra Banks. I reached out to her on July 7th of 2021. And we met on July 20th. And I basically told her all of my concerns, and she said she...
Come on, Stream.
She took notes and told me that she would escalate my matter. On July 23rd,
Escalate, in your view, means take it up the ladder to
Yes.
a higher, somebody above Mr. Cuffey.
absolutely.
Okay.
So she sent one email to
It
Fani.
was just
Fani
so much.
didn't
I was
respond.
extremely
Then she goes
anxious,
to HR.
even coming to work, because I just didn't know from day to day what type of retaliation I would receive. On July 26th, I reached out to Dexter Bond, who is the
I think this is Vimeo.
chief of staff
Not-
in the
Chief of
DA's
staff.
office.
The
to
Senate
Ms.
stream
Willis?
itself.
Yes.
They're running it through Vimeo.
And I reached out to Dexter because we worked in the previous administration together. He knew my work ethic. And I just felt like I needed somebody in the office to understand and know what was going on. And
What was his role with Paul Howard?
he, under Paul, I think he wasn't chief of staff. I think he was I can't remember his exact role if I'm being honest, but he was a high
Administrative
up,
position?
yeah.
Okay.
And
so
he's an attorney as well.
he had worked in higher levels of administration for DA Paul Howard as well.
Yes.
before. So you reached out to him
Yes.
directly. All right, tell us about that.
And I told him there were youth in the junior DA program from out of the area. I told him how he treated me. I told him about the PDP. I told him about the OJJDP funds, and I sent him a copy of the PDP, and I told him specifically in a text. Well, I spoke to him in person, and then I sent him a picture of this professional development plan, and I said to him specifically that at this point in time, like, he's putting you guys in a situation where I have multiple potential lawsuits because of how he's treating me, and I said I need to speak with that was, I believe, at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then about 5, he responded back to the PDP by saying, wow, period, this is a problem, period. then text me saying, you have a meeting with the DA at 3 p.m.
This is in July of 21 sometime.
Yes, this is July 26th of 2021. And so immediately, I felt like a weight was lifted. Finally, I'll get to let her know, because I felt like I was trying to, in part, protect her, protect the youth of Fulton County, and just protect the integrity of these grants. And so ultimately, at 3 p.m., I went to Miss Willis's office. Judging by Dexter was in this meeting, I could tell that she was already kind of briefed. And she said something to the effect of, now what's going on? So I went to speak and tell her. I said, I'm concerned about the way the grants, and I think I said something else, and she cut me right off in the middle of my sentence and said, effective immediately, you're going to be moved, and demoted me to the role of file clerk. So immediately,
You went from a department head to a file clerk.
Correct, a program head. So I went from the director of Juvenile Diversion to a file clerk, which changed not only the function of my job, it changed my schedule, it changed my location, it changed, this is frivolous, but I was taken off the website. I was essentially like banished for what I saw to be protecting her at the time.
Did she say why you were being demoted?
No, not at that time. The meeting lasted maybe 2 to 5 minutes, because she cut me off immediately and told me I was demoted. So I was kind of left flabbergasted. And I reached back to her that evening via email just to get some clarity. And that was the first time I ever heard that she was saying that she wasn't pleased with my work. And it's important to note, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, I feel like we're already there, but it's important to note that 3 weeks prior to this, she had just asked me to assist in another department. So 3 weeks before, she wasn't dissatisfied with my work. So
Yeah,
it was
that's
shocking to me
interesting.
that suddenly she was dissatisfied with my work the day that I disclosed that I was concerned about the way these funds were being spent.
You have mentioned several times about retaliation. What type of conduct or actions were aimed towards you that you felt were retaliation? This demotion's pretty clear cut, but
Yeah.
were you being treated differently by Mr. Cuffey or Mr. Bond or any other supervisory type employees?
Yes. Treatment as far as, like I said, being disinvited to meetings, just the attitude of when I would ask for things or ask for additional like guidance or feedback, it wouldn't happen. I also, in addition to, I sent him an email because he was essentially stifling my work. I was completing tasks that Ms. Willis had asked me in previous meetings, and I would be asking him like, hey, did you get this to her? Hey, I've had this done. Did you look over it? I'm waiting for your feedback. And I was just essentially put on the back burner. Also, like the PDP, the demotion was the first act from Ms. Willis directly. And then after that, because of the change in my work schedule and the change in my work location, I had asked for accommodations or a different setting because they were rehabbing the building, and it was causing me some health issues because I have pre-existing existing condition. And I was told no, and told if I brought it up again, it would negatively impact my future evaluations, which would impact my employment. And about an hour later, my laptop was confiscated, so I couldn't work from home even if I wanted to. Sometimes I would come to work and now as a file clerk, I would literally be putting thousands of documents into alphabetical order and then creating an Excel spreadsheet. And
What
things would.
department were you in as a file clerk? Were you changed to a different department or just removed as program head and kept in that same juvenile justice department?
No, I was moved to record restriction, and then ultimately I became the file clerk liaison between pre-indictment, pretrial indictment diversion for adults and the record restriction. So stuff I've never done or have any type of.
Record restriction is what us old guys used to call expungement.
Yes.
From your record. Okay, now
Yes, sir.
they restrict your record so people can't see about your prior convictions or charges against you that you've resolved through a pretrial diversion program or first offender plea, something like that.
Yes.
Okay, totally different than what you were trained to do, your interest, your background, and your experience under Paul Howard's office.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I didn't receive any real training, so I couldn't go into certain systems. The only thing I could really do is put things in alphabetical order and put them into Excel spreadsheets, and that's what I did. And there was 2 occasions where I came to work and the over 1,500 documents that I put in alphabetical order were now all in disarray. So things like that, to where it just made coming to work a very anxious event.
Okay. Did you ever have any further conversations with Ms. Willis where you expressed your concerns about the misuse of federal funds?
I did. So on November 19th of 2021, I had an opportunity to speak with Ms. Willis again. And because the fact that the first time I spoke with her regarding these funds, I was demoted, I decided to record her. And I think it was just because I was fearful of what type of retaliation even bringing it up would have. But also, again, like my track record with her was the last time I did this, I was demoted. And so I did have a chance to speak with her, and I told her.
Was that an in-person conversation?
It was an in-person conversation.
How did you record that conversation?
On my phone.
All right, tell us about that conversation.
Yes, sir. I just spoke with her and told her about my concerns with the grants and how I knew that the grants were allocated for a specific purpose, and the way that Mr. Cuffey was essentially stating that he wanted to spend the grants was illegal. It was impossible under the grant. And she said that she didn't disagree with me, and she said she really wanted me to listen to the words that she was saying, that I wasn't necessarily wrong, essentially. And then she proceeded to tell me that Michael Cuffey had failed in her administration, and that everybody who does that essentially pretends to be her friend. And I just went on to say that I felt like there was some, I think I said funny style business going on, and I just wanted to ensure that she knew. And she proceeded to tell me that things take a long time to get to her. It's a new administration. But not once did she ever say that I was wrong. Not once did she ever say that I was off base or that what I was saying was untrue at any point in our conversation. And so that was November 19th. December 7th of 2021, I wrote her an email, and I CC'd Dominique Martinez, who is, I believe, one of the county attorneys, and I just kind of told her, what I had experienced in the office, and that how my treatment had brought me a significant amount of anxiety. I thought that I was going to ultimately retire from the DA's office, and it made a place that I used to be proud of working at hell for me, essentially. I never received a letter back or any notice that she even read it. And then in January, I don't know if you want me to go that far.
Oh, you're doing great. So
Okay.
now you're up to January of 22.
Yes,
So you've been still working there for a year. You just got demoted and essentially harassed in your employment.
yes.
And taken off of websites and cut out of meetings, et cetera. Okay.
Absolutely. And so in December 22nd of 2022, I was actually sent home due to COVID. Somebody was exposed with COVID, and they knew that I was unvaccinated, so I was sent home. And then I got sick, and when I get sick, I get really, really sick. And so I returned back to work on January 12th of 2022 with multiple doctor's letters, because that's what they asked me for.
Prove you weren't contagious with COVID or whatever.
Yes, I was actually told to quarantine for 10 days and then come back. But it was obviously during the holidays, because I was sent home on the 22nd. And then I came back on January 12th and January 14th. Oh, on January 12th, I got my leave slip signed and all that good stuff.
We don't know what that means. What's a leave slip?
Oh, excuse me, sorry. When you leave from work, so I produced my documents from my
Okay.
physician, and then they signed.
Excused absence, basically. You had your doctor's note.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
And then January 12th, I made my third. I kind of have to go back. January 12th, I made another request for health related accommodation, but I also, during this time, if I could go back, December 2nd was my first official complaint with the DCRC, which is the
Okay, we got to slow down on that. That's
Yes.
the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights Compliance?
Yes, sir.
Is that a county office?
yes.
And y'all refer to that as the DCRC, is kind of the vernacular as
Yes.
for county employees?
Yes, sir.
When did you first complain to them?
I first complained to them December 2nd of 2021. And I made another complaint, I believe, on December 18th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And then I made my third, well, let me get to the January 14th. So January 14th, the January 12th email that I sent regarding my health, I CC'd one of my supervisors at this time now.
Come on, Vimeo.
And on the morning on January 13th, she asked me what it was about, and then January 14th, she asked me into her office just to make sure I was okay, or so I thought. So I had a discussion with her. I had a pre-arranged meeting with the director of the DCRC, Niger Thomas, at 1 p.m. on January 14th of 2022.
Okay.
Following my conversation with Miss Ramona Toole
That was
about,
the supervisor that you had talked to?
yes, she was my supervisor. I essentially, unfortunately, told her everything. I just told her, what was going on. I told her about my health issues. I told her about the retaliation. And so following that meeting, I had my prearranged meeting with Miss Niger Thomas. I went to that meeting with Miss Niger Thomas at 1 p.m.
She is the director of the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights Compliance.
She was at the time. Now it's Melissa Cathrell, but she was at the time. And I went in there to speak with her about the whistleblowing and how ultimately the whistleblowing led to all this additional retaliation. And I was in her office for probably about 90 minutes.
The
When-
whistleblowing was bringing up the misuse of federal funds.
Correct.
Okay.
And so I was in her office for about 90 minutes. While I was in the office with her, I received to my county phone a request for a meeting request for January 18th at 2 p.m. From Miss Willis and Dexter Bond. I told Miss Niger Thomas in that meeting that I did not feel safe going into that meeting by myself. And she said that she would have a member of the Fulton County Human Resources Department accompany me to that meeting if I didn't feel safe. And I asked,
Did
and
Ms. Willis tell you in that phone text the purpose or the reason for the January 18th meeting?
no, it was just it just came to my email from my phone, from my
Okay.
county
So it
phone.
was an email.
Yes. And so I guess I left that meeting scared, but kind of glad that I felt somebody else was essentially like in my corner to advocate for me. Somebody would be with me at that meeting on the 18th, so I wouldn't be by myself. And I went back to my area and continued on my Excel spreadsheet that I started that morning. About 20 to 25 minutes later, there's like a knock on the side of the thing, and they said Capers Green, who was the chief investigator for under Miss Willis, he said, Miss Timpson, I got some unfortunate documentation for you. I need you to get your stuff, and we're going to walk you out the building. And he handed me my termination letter. And
Immediately after you meeting with the director of the Diversity and Civil Rights Compliance Division,
yes,
you think she ratted you out or told them that you were making these complaints?
I believe that Ramona Toole, in the conversation that we had that morning, went directly to Miss Willis, and I think that it's possible that Niger Thomas said something. I cannot speak to that, but I think it's more likely that Ramona Toole, who is a good friend and ally of Miss Willis, must have went to her office and let her know that I told her what was going on. And ultimately, I was walked out of the building by 7 armed investigators and given a letter that was completely, it just says that I'm an at-will employee and that my services were no longer needed.
Didn't give a reason for your termination?
They
7
did
people
not
walked her
include. I didn't receive a separation letter for almost 2 months because they refused to give that to me. But when they did, it just said employee discharge. So I had no understanding to this day because ultimately the PDP that Cuffey had written was Ms. Willis did say that was null and void. He didn't follow proper channels. There was no documentation. So
So
there
it
was
wasn't for
no,
that.
I have never received a warning in the almost 4 years that I was at the DA's office. In fact, the opposite. I have received praises from both Ms. Willis and Mr. Howard my entire time at the DA's office. I've never required or received any disciplinary action on any level outside of the retaliation and ultimate termination from my job.
What are the DA's office's rules about retaliation for raising issues or whistleblowing or bringing irregularities to their attention? Does the DA's office have a personnel policy, or is it covered by Fulton County's personnel policy?
My understanding is, well, at the time that I was fired, under Miss Willis, they didn't have an employee handbook. That was something that was still being worked on, so there was no policy, so we fell under the Fulton County policy. And under Fulton County policy, it's my understanding that it's unlawful, just like it is in the state of Georgia, to retaliate against, demote, or provide any adverse employment actions against somebody who is blowing the whistle.
Okay. And after that, you're out of work.
So yes, after that, I'm out of work as a last attempt at retaliation. The time
All right, so it looks like I have a blip of internet back, but it came back once and it went away before I could get back in touch with you guys. I pasted a link in the chat to Nick Starro. He is also covering the Senate committee hearing right now. Rather than risk Spectrum internet going down again, which typically when it goes down once, it goes in spurts, I'm going to paste the link to the Senate committee hearing. That's the Vimeo link. And if you want to watch it with the chat, use the link I posted to Nick Starro's video. Let's all move over there. That way, no more Spectrum issues. So sorry about that, guys. So sorry. But thank you for joining in and having the conversation so far. If you want to continue the chat, we'll be in Nick Starro's channel. Bye.